Hey everyone, and welcome to the GXM podcast. We take a good hard look at news and topics around video game music and the intersection between the games and music industries. We aim to publish fortnightly, so please be sure to subscribe to catch us on the regular. My name is Tom Quilfelt. I'm a freelancer and game music fan, as well as doing marketing, community management and A&R for the video game soundtrack label Laced Records, and I podcast with the Cane and Rinse team. Joining me is journalist Matt Ombler, who has interviewed a long list of composers, music artists and others across this space, with pieces published in NME, The Washington Post, Wired and many more. Matt, what have you been up to this week?
I have been sinking far too much time into Final Fantasy XVI. I know you haven't played it yet, but you are in for a treat, even though I think it's different than a lot of people are expecting in terms of it is quite a lot heavier on the action and a lot lighter on the RPG elements that most people are expecting. But I'm enjoying it. It's really cool. First time obviously hearing Sirkin's music as well, so that's a new experience for me. And yet another really big single player AAA game that I just generally do not have the time to play. So, but you will have the time to play Final Fantasy 16 soon, because I believe you are finally wrapped up with Persona.
I have finished Persona 5 Royal, the officially, according to IGN, longest story game out there.
Are the side quests and stuff as well?
Sort of. It's structured in a very interesting way, but I spent about 160 hours or so beating it, and that's not including, I guess, like restarts or yeah. That was my game clock. So it's finally over. The smooth jazz is finally out of my life, sadly, because I then went back to the soundtrack album. I've got this massive Persona list with all the games that are available currently on Apple Music, and I kind of listened with new ears, because something with these Persona games is they're so flipping long and they're kind of structured around a year of the character's life. So they kind of feel like they are your substitute life in a way. They are your kind of means of escaping into a different existence set in Japan, in either small town Japan or big city Japan. And I've got to say that the listening to it after 160 hours, and it was on a Switch, a lot of the time I had the sound down or wasn't paying too much attention to the music, even though I could appreciate it was excellent. Listening to it on my proper desk speakers and just like slowly going track to track and like marking out my favourites. It is a beast of a soundtrack. It is an absolute monster. It's and definitely one of my favourite now soundtracks, full stop. So I'm really glad, I managed to fit it in. If it weren't for Switch, I don't think I could. And apparently the Persona 3 remake is not launching on Switch, so I won't be.
So you've dodged a bullet.
Yeah, well, something like that. Yeah,
dodged the social bullet.
I've dodged the social bullet. Yeah, I mean it's straight into Zelda. I mean, hammering Zelda with the kids. They're loving it. I bought a big hardback guide, so they can now like sit on the sofa and like look stuff up and practice their map reading, which is quite hilarious, because they've already ripped within the first day. They'd like ripped a page, because this big heavy thing keeps falling off their lap. They'd already ripped a page, bent other bits and stuff. So they've been loving that, and then also on to Spiritfarer, which we're doing for Cane and Rinse in a couple of weeks, which is a lovely game with a lovely soundtrack. What have you been listening to anything lately?
Listening wise, I have discovered a YouTube channel for a group called the Senzoku Game Music Brass, which is basically Japanese woodwind game orchestra. They've got videos of all of these different game soundtracks: Mario Kart 8, Ocarina of Time, Super Mario Galaxy, Breath of the Wild, all brass, which you can't even tell sometimes it's that well put together. It sounds so thick, but my favourite video out of them all, they've done a Pokemon Red and Blue medley. It is genuinely like the best set of Pokemon arrangements I've ever listened to. They're flawless, and they've got this lass on drums, and she is absolutely killing it. Like, absolutely going for it, like metal drum style. But you need to listen to it. Everyone needs to listen to it. It's phenomenal. It really, really is.
That does sound like right in the middle of your Venn diagram.
It is.
Like metal drums on a Pokemon arrangement. Shall we get into some news?
Yes, it has been a busy week for game music.
It has been a busy fortnight since our last show. The biggest thing, I guess, is that last night Geoff Keighley did his big Game Awards 10-year concert with fireworks, and the fireworks looked flipping epic, I must say. So that was on June 25th, 2023. If you're listening in the future, they played music from all the biggest games of the day, I'd say, like Elden Ring, Final Fantasy 16, which has just come out, Diablo 4, which has just come out, Hades, which is a bit older, and they got Tenacious D to come and play their song Video Games, which we talked about a while back. And Jack Black performed his Bowser Peaches love song as well, which was hilarious and ended with him kind of draped across the piano. So yeah, only a few clips I've seen on social media, unfortunately. I didn't find a kind of full upload on YouTube yet. Maybe that will come in a little while. But you had the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Keighley for Video Games Chronicle, VGC, for an interesting piece, very well researched with all your different examples as well. You didn't get too much out of Geoff, but he said a few kind of key things, didn't he, about what music means to him?
Yeah, it was literally, I think it was like a 15-minute chat in total, and then once you've lost 5 minutes straight away, do you know what I mean? Just doing the niceties of generally speaking to someone, but was not surprised, because I guess it makes sense when you consider the caliber of names that have played at the Game Awards. Green Day, Halsey, Herzier, even though that came through Sony, but still, do you know what I mean? Like really, really big artists. He was basically saying he knows a lot of people in the music industry, has forged really strong relationships with a lot of artists and a lot of managers too. Hence the Imagine Dragons and the Legend of Zelda performance, debut of the Game Awards back in 2014. It was Koji Kondo, the Legend of Zelda's composer, Nintendo's in-house composer, took to the stage with Imagine Dragons, the American pop band, just basically jamming out on stage, which is just a hilarious video, because we were talking about it briefly earlier. You've got Koji Kondo on stage in front of all of these people, and this is a guy who doesn't really do public performances much, do you know what I mean? So you can tell he's kind of got like stage fright. And then at the opposite end, you've got Imagine Dragons just kind of looking with complete admiration and awe at this composer who's essentially written the soundtrack for the childhood. So, and
they're doing the Westlife thing. They're kind of all sitting on seats playing acoustic instruments, and it's all very like. Whereas, you know, Imagine Dragons, you could imagine are most comfortable with explosions going off and giant sounding kind of, you know, audio enhanced rock performance.
The thing that I liked the most was, I think he was speaking from a genuine passion of wanting to do cool stuff.
Geoff, this is, yeah.
Yeah. The big thing that he said to me that stood out was he wants the music industry to stop seeing video games as just a platform for licensing music, which I think is something we've spoken about quite a lot, both on here and just kind of in chats together, where...
Just behind that comment, do you think that's Grand Theft Auto has kind of set that kind of expectation, maybe? Because Grand Theft Auto 5, say, launched... Okay, they had some artist radio stations, and they have had in the past, actually.
Yeah. I mean, no, you're right. It's interesting because there's been curated radio stations, right, in terms of, I think Saints Row did this quite a lot with getting labels to kind of do entire radio takeovers, but obviously with GTA 5, you've got Flying Lotus doing his radio station, and it's a lot more personalised, but you kind of look at 10 years ago, GTA 5 was, I guess, the big one with pushing music, and I think it is only in the last 10 years, not that you've had artists and bands writing original music for games, because that obviously goes way back. You've got, like, David Bowie did that video game, didn't he, a long time ago, and you've got
Omicron the Nomad Soul.
So you've got examples like that, but I think they're few and far between. But in the last 10 years, there seems to be kind of like a coordinated push of probably people like our age who grew up playing video games and have found successful careers as musicians who are now kind of going, we'd love to do something for games. Like, look at what Kojima did with Death Stranding. That wasn't just a load of music synced into the game. Some of that music was written for Death Stranding, do you know, where the bands are kind of immersing themselves in the themes of the game and the narrative and the stuff like that.
And we know that Geoff introduced Churches and Hideo Kojima. But, I mean, they're kind of swimming in a kind of celebrity creator world, aren't they? Geoff Keighley, Hideo Kojima and stuff. So like, these are kind of random one-offs that can happen at, you know, in LA or whatever, award shows or things like that. But, you know, him saying that he wants the broader music industry to think more of the games industry overall as an opportunity, as collaborative partners and stuff like that. And that's a fairly noble, if vague, thing to call for, isn't it?
I think what's interesting, it'd be cool to hear your thoughts on this, because I was going to say, so on the kind of celebrity link, there's stuff going on with not independent games, but smaller games as well. I'm thinking Neon White and Machine Girl. I'm thinking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles having RZA from Wu-Tang do that track.
He did a track for Absolver as well, which was a sort
of... Oh, really?
The seafood developers' previous martial arts game released on Devolver.
I never knew that. That's class.
He did a track, and Austin Wintory was a composer, but RZA came on to do a track.
And then you've got Sigur Rós, the Icelandic rock band, writing music for parts of Snufkin, Melody of Moomin Valley. 65, Days of Static, who I know you're a fan of, did No Man's Sky. But a lot of these examples, where I'm going from this, is it's been game developers reaching out to the bands that they're really big fans of. It would be cool to see the opposite happen, where musicians are kind of saying to their managers and music supervisors, sync reps, we would love to do this for this gaming franchise because we're really big fans of it. Can we find a way to make something happen? Like, I can't think of any examples at the top of my head where that's been the case. Can you?
No, I'm sure it's happened, but I cannot think off the top of my head. I can only think of examples. Like, I know that 65 Days... Hello Games got in touch with them for the reveal trailer, and then they ended up having a deeper collaboration. I don't know how Hudson Mohawk found his way to Watch Dogs 2. So it would just be more. Yeah, we want it to happen more often. Geoff Keighley wants it to happen more often. It would be nice if there was a better dialogue. I guess that's what the whole podcast is about, really. It's just trying to get, ideally, if we can get more music industry people on, if we can get like a band manager or something on who's interested in video games, and just try and expose where the problem is, if there's a problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, where is the miscommunication? Where are the misunderstandings? And can we do our little part to plug that communication gap?
Yeah, 100%.
Did you just the last bit on Keighley and your piece? Is there anything you learned from it that you didn't know before or was particularly surprising?
I think the most surprising thing was, like I was saying, how genuine Keighley was when he was talking about the importance of music in the Game Awards. Because I think as an outsider, it would be very easy to kind of go, he's just doing this for the credibility, in terms of he's just getting these bands and artists involved to just profile the Game Awards. which obviously that is a part of what he's doing, you know. It would be foolish to say that's not a part. Like, you get big names involved for promotion, but he was saying it's not just a case of we choose anyone that's out there in the world of music and just get them to come and perform at the Game Awards. He says there needs to be a link with gaming. Like, it needs to seem like the right fit. And if you look back at the music collaborations there have been with the Game Awards over the years, you can see that whoever's performed has either written a song for a video game or they've done something. There was an entire year where it was pretty much a Riot Games takeover, and it was all artists that have done the Worlds themes for League of Legends, and just things like that. So that was the thing I think that stood out, the genuine passion for going, I want to be the person that helps connect the dots between gaming and music, because like you just said then, there's not that many people doing that. So one, it kind of needs to happen, but two, if you can be that guy who develops the reputation for going, I know the gaming guys, I know the music guys, I can bring them together, that's going to benefit him as well.
And you spoke a little while back about your frustration for not being able to get hold of a Sonic Symphony World Tour ticket. Is there good news on the horizon for you?
There is excellent news. So, huge fan of the music in Sonic games. I think it's brilliant, from the original games to Sonic Adventure. They've announced more dates for the Sonic Symphony World Tour. The London one sold out, I think, pretty much instantly. I don't know if you were keeping an eye on tickets, but I swear that sold out in a couple of minutes. So they've done what the Barbican does best, and they have announced a day concert on the same day. So I am now going to the 3 p.m. Showing of Sonic Symphony World Tour, if I can get tickets, but I'll make sure I'm definitely around for these. But what's interesting is they've not just announced new dates for London and LA, they have announced new dates in Paris, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, Dusseldorf, loads more cities in America too. So I think the Sonic Symphony World Tour is going to be an ongoing tour in production, in a similar vein to the likes of Distant Worlds, Symphony of the Goddess and stuff like that.
When are these shows? When are the London and Los Angeles? When's the new London show?
So the London show is September 16th, 2023. The LA day is September 30th, 2023. And then the other locations are from October right up until March next year. So this is a very big and long tour.
Cool. So, Matt, we a bit behind the scenes. We haven't yet recorded our interview for this show, but we're hoping to get a topic in about the rise of video game music DJs and mix sets. This is a very you topic. It's something I'd love to learn more about. Who's the interviewee we've got coming up?
So the interviewee you will be listening to shortly is a Brazilian DJ, a guy called Dedeco. He is an actual DJ, he's not just someone who messes with video game music for a living, but he's got a huge passion for video game music and created a YouTube channel, which is how I found him, DedecoVGMDJ, I think it's DedecoVGM, where he just puts these awesome mixes together in DJ sets of all of these left field cuts from video games, which some people have played. So there's some cool ones in there like Tekken, you know, the games that have a natural link with that kind of club music, Ridge Racer and stuff like that, but a lot of really obscure tunes as well. And I think that's why I've enjoyed listening to it, because it's been a really nice gateway to all of this amazing Japanese music that I never knew existed. So I am looking forward to diving into all of that and much more. Dedeco, thank you so much for joining us. I've been listening to you and your VGM sets for a long, long time now. I think pretty much since you first started. I think I was one of the original Patreon supporters, an OG fan. For anyone who's not heard of you, can you just give us a quick overview of what you do and why you do it?
Yeah, I'm Dedeco. I'm from Brazil. I'm a producer, music producer, and DJ. For the last, I think, like almost 2 years, I've been working on the video game music DJ set series on YouTube. It's a series where I DJ video game music that I think would be fit for actual like clubs and rave parties. I started that because I had already played like I've been a DJ for a while now, and video game music was part of my research because I love video games as a hobby, has always loved it. And as soon as I got into electronic music, like for real, as I went back and forth between like digging for electronic music and playing games, I started to see more and more like the super rich value that those VGM soundtracks had, those video game soundtracks had. So yeah, like a bit before the pandemic, that was when like I was playing like a big party, like in a circus tent and everything. It was pretty filled with people, and I dropped a track from Ridge Racer and a track from Persona 3. And it was just amazing, like to see all the cool techno kids dancing to Persona music, you know. And they couldn't even notice, like everybody was grooving super hard because it's just like good ass music. And as a DJ, I always want to like go deeper and search for like the obscure stuff, both like the classic stuff, but also like the cutting edge, the new stuff. So that eventually led me to video game music, like naturally, you know, because it's just so rich and it's like a history so filled with such interesting music and different. And so yeah, I thought, man, it was during the pandemic, and I had bought like a green screen because I wanted to record like some of my own music. And then I was like, I was almost like falling asleep, and it hit me like a lightning, like, man, you could record video game music sets and nobody's doing that, and it's gonna be awesome, and you'll probably be able to live off that in a little while. And I did it, and it worked out, and that's how I pay my bills nowadays. It's thanks to, you know, the supporters on Patreon that I got through the VGM sets. So that was it.
That's amazing. So you're genuinely like making a living out of this now?
Yeah, like if I lived in Europe or the USA, I probably wouldn't be able to make a living out of it. You know, the currency here is super undervalued now. Yeah, I'm able to have like a comfortable life.
When you got this idea and wanted to start doing VGM DJ sets, nobody else was really doing it at the time. And then you look at YouTube now, if you go on YouTube and type in N64 or PlayStation Club Mix or VGM set or anything, there's a lot more videos coming up. So why do you think there's been this explosion of VGM club mixes and sets in the last year? Like, where do you think all of this is coming from?
There's probably like a zeitgeist aspect to it, you know, like the people who grew up with these soundtracks, just like me, were able to go back to it and see the value in it and wanted to you know, work with it and like show it to the world. Also, there's been like, especially with jungle music and drum and bass, there's been like a bit of a resurgence of it, you know, especially with that YouTube channel Ambience. That Piche studio set that just went like incredibly viral, and I think that has inspired a lot of people to go back and look into jungle and stuff. And the history of jungle and video game music, it's like it's very close, you know, like it's they were influencing each other back and forth, like the jungle producers and the video game composers, I think. So I think one thing like leads naturally to the other, you know. I think people just realized like the value it has.
Do you not think it's slightly strange that you've got this resurgence of jungle and I guess like liquid, chilled drum and bass, and video game soundtracks aren't like that anymore, to be honest, are they? But then you see these playlists and these mixes racking up millions of views and plays, and at the same time, you seem to have more DJs actually like at legit radio stations playing VGM. Like, seen Techie Latex, he did a set, his Radio 1 residency. I mean, Techie Latex normally does this quite a lot in his sets. He's a techno DJ for anyone listening who's not familiar with him. And he's always dropping weird video game songs. I've watched a couple of the sets where he's just like blended Animal Crossing into loads of random disco songs and then got into some really hard techno. But it's weird that there seems to be this appetite for jungle and drum and bass and like those genres of music from the 90s, and I don't feel they are really represented in modern day game soundtracks. I think the most recent example I can think of, and this isn't really drum and bass or jungle, but it's what Machine Girl did with the music in Neon White. But I can't really think of any other recent games. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there was one of the pioneers, like, who not anticipated but like predated this like jungle resurgence was Krasnik Plus. It's a puzzle game with like this Y2K aesthetic. It did Y2K before it became like super oversaturated. And it's a pretty cool game. The developer, Max Krieger, he's a cool guy as well. And yeah, like game development takes a while. So now that this whole Y2K drum and bass stuff blew up, you'll see more and more of this, you know. Like I saw another puzzle game like this the other day. But yeah, there's not many of them. Like I don't think like the big industry, like AAA stuff, is definitely not looking into that. And even if they are, like you'll just see the results of that influence in like 6 or 7 years, which is how long they take to make games nowadays, like those AAA games. And but for the indies, you can expect like a lot of great jungle in video games. Like I'm pretty sure of that.
I feel like there's an opportunity there for someone to do something, and if you can't talk about this, that's fine, but aren't you working on a game soundtrack at the moment? Can you tell us any more about that?
Yeah, I am. I actually am, yeah. It's an indie game from New York. It's called Mob Spawn. You can wishlist it already, I think, on Steam. I haven't really announced it yet. This is like the announcement, I guess.
There we go.
Yeah, so like the guys, they found me through the VGMDJ sets, and they saw that I produce music as well. And it was pretty cool because like I've worked on soundtracks before, but every time I worked on soundtracks, I was like, man, I wish I could be making like my own stuff, you know. Yeah. Like my house tunes and my drum and bass. So he approached me and I was like, man, I don't really like doing soundtracks, but there's like this sort of music that I want to do, and I think it might fit your video game, you know. So I made like a few demos and sent it to him, and he was like, he said it was like he felt emotional with it. So that was cool. Like every song that I send them, I don't have to like make any revisions and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been great. Like so far, I've got like 3 super banging like house tunes. I'll make some drum and bass as well for it. I think like for the boss battles, you know.
What do you think house representation is like in video games? Like just taking a quick look at the genres, because there's a ton of jungle and drum and bass in video games, right? Especially in those kind of like sports and racing games. Like when you've been curating your playlists for your sets, have you found it difficult putting together selections for certain genres of electronic music?
Man, actually no. Like, because there's so much stuff out there, you know, and
You just need to find it.
yeah, I can look at numbers for you here, like, because I organized my video game music folder into genres. So let us see. So this is excluding the new PlayStation 2 music that I found. I have 50 gigabytes of PlayStation 2 music here. That was trimmed down from I think 75 that I had originally. So let's see, like drum and bass and jungle, I have 10 gigabytes over here, 665 files. Techno, we have 17 gigabytes, 960 files. And house music, like the house music folder is a bit more messy, because like I put a lot of stuff that resembles house there. That's not like necessarily house, but has like a house vibe to it. But it's the biggest one. You have like 18 gigabytes, 1,121 files.
What's the smallest genre in there you've got?
The smallest, probably like disco. You don't have a lot of disco. It's the hardest one to find. I haven't even like separated it. It's thrown in the house folder. The disco folder is empty because I forgot to organize it.
You've got this massive hard drive of all these video game tracks. How much work goes into finding them? Like, where do you source these songs from?
Many places. It started with stuff that I already knew, you know, like, so going into like Streets of Rage, like Ridge Racer, Persona, like those very classic, very famous, established franchises, you know, that are famous for their music, like Wipeout and stuff. After that, I started looking like, that was like right at the beginning. Oh, Bomberman Hero, of course, which was like sort of what kickstarted it all for me. Like it was the game that introduced me to Jungle when I was a kid, and I'd rent it just like to listen to the soundtrack, because the game is kind of like not so good actually. So after going like through stuff that I already knew, I normally go like through composer. Like I know this composer worked on Ridge Racer, let's see everything that they've done, you know. So then I find like a lot of stuff, and it's normal for game soundtracks to have multiple composers. So through this composer I find this other soundtrack that has multiple composers as well, and I go through all of that as well. I go through game company and like era for that game company. So Namco in the late 90s, early 2000s, like pretty much everything they put out was amazing. Then I also go through like for the PS2 mix, that was like the most effort I put into research, because I wanted to make like something huge, you know. So what I did was like, I have this Excel sheet with all the PS2 games, and I found this video on YouTube that has like 10 seconds of gameplay for every PS2 game. So I watched that's like an 11-hour long video. So I watched that video in its entirety, you know, like skipping a bit and stuff. And everything that caught my eye. Like if I heard like a whisper of a breakbeat like in the distance, in any of those like thousands of games, I would look into it. And that was it. It all begins with having an interest in video games. You know, like I like video games. I like to research about video games. I use this website Groovy, which is like sort of like Letterboxd but for games. And I have like huge lists over there. I love playing them, and I like playing games with good music in them, so I'm looking for that. So it all like it's a combination of like all those things, I guess. Also some YouTube channels. Yeah, that's important to mention. Like some channels dedicated to posting like individual tracks. I don't like to listen to a lot of those mixes because I feel a bit weird, like I'm stealing their track lists, you know. But when it's like these channels that post individual tracks, my favorite one is Alpha, the YouTube channel. I love their channel, like
he
so
posts
much
some
good
wild
stuff, and it's so obscure, like these PSP visual novels, you know, that have like 70
they have the
tracks
best
in them.
soundtracks.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is for this era of video game music to be represented? Because when people talk about their favorite video game soundtracks, it's easy to go Uematsu stuff for Final Fantasy or Koji Kondo stuff for The Legend of Zelda. I feel like we're moving to more of a place now where people are discovering music from videos like yours, and then the alpha videos, and then the mixes that people like Ryland are doing as well. So we're moving to a space, or at least it looks like it, where people are no longer going, I enjoy listening to video game music now and again, and Uematsu, I really love him, he's one of my favourite composers. I feel like now we're moving more towards, I've been listening to this really cool soundtrack from a guy called Simon Robertson who did Extreme G, and it's just kind of like a really not very good racing game on the N64, but the soundtrack is, do you know what I mean? I want more of that. Like, do you think we're getting more of that?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like those Ryland videos, they stack up so many views. It's impossible not to make people interested, I think, you know, into going deeper, because that's like, if you're like a music nerd, you know that you always want to go deeper, you know, you always want to find like the crazy stuff. It's very satisfying to like find, you know, that track, that album. So yeah, and then you have like this universe that's been sort of hidden away for so long, and then like now the gates are open, you know. The gates are like completely open. So I think people that's going to happen. Like, oh man, I was listening to Armored Core Nexus the other day. That's such a banging soundtrack. Yeah, that's should become normal, I think.
I hope it does, because if millions of people, like we were saying, like Ryland, the views he gets on his videos are wild. There seems to be an appetite for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think it's that appetite that is making people go, Kazina Nertam, maybe we should press that on vinyl. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of older legacy video game soundtracks that are getting pressed now. Yeah. I never thought we would see Bomberman Hero get pressed onto vinyl. Yeah. And when I saw that announced, I lost my mind. Yeah. I was like, no way, I can listen to this music like in high quality, no longer like these like 720 YouTube videos. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can actually listen to this music properly, and that's great news. Just going back to your PS2 DJ set quickly, because that's your next big video coming out.
Yeah.
Are there any tracks in there that you're confident not a lot of people will have heard?
There's some that like were not even posted to YouTube. I think the wildest one is from sort of a little bit surreal, I think. and the track is so good. It's from, man, there are two. One is from this iToy game. I don't know if you remember the iToy.
Yeah, camera thing.
Yeah, it's like from this iToy game. You can't find that soundtrack online, I think. It's a very good track. And the other one, which is the more mind-blowing one, is from Germany's Next Top Model, the video game, released exclusively in Germany for the PlayStation 2. That soundtrack is so amazing.
What would you say to people who maybe listen to like a lot of jungle or listen to a lot of house music or listen to a lot of drum and bass and whatever else, and they've never really listened to that era of video game soundtracks? What would you say to like the video game music naysayers that kind of go, oh, it's just music for games, there's no way you'd be able to find the stuff that I listen to in video games?
Oh man, so I don't know if you saw that, but I had a tweet go viral the other day, which was like just like I was listening through all the PS2 music that I had downloaded, and I saw that there was a lot of drum and bass there and not a lot of jungle. I was separating them into genres, you know? And I had worked on a PS1 video before, and there was a lot of jungle, like hardcore breakbeat stuff in that PS1 mix. So I tweeted, PS1 equals jungle console, PS2 equals drum and bass console. And when I saw, I had like people telling me to kill myself because of that tweet. What? Which was like the biggest like Twitter moment ever, you know? But it was like, it ended up in a very interesting discussion, I found, actually, because there's this talk about like how these VGM mixes might be like gentrifying jungle and stuff, and I see where they're coming from that. Like I'm a Brazilian, so when I see like people from, you know, England or United States making baile funk, you know, it kind of irks me a bit. But I think what they need to understand is that the history of those genres are not disconnected, you know? Like I find that it's like a bit problematic to listen to jungle and drum and bass only in the form of video game music, like with total disregard for like its origins. It's like black origins, you know, from like the outskirts of London and stuff. But I also think it's like problematic not to see how these things like feed into each other. Like I think it would be very interesting to have like one of those flow charts, you know, like a map, because that's like my whole thing. Like my biggest point with this project is that video game music is important to the history of electronic music in general. Like it is a big chunk of it, you know, it's part of it. It retrofeeds itself, you know, like it, like you have that series of documentaries by Nick Dwyer that he made for Red Bull, like Digging in the Carts. You can see there like these amazing producers, like you have Flying Lotus, you have Code 9 mentioning how those video game soundtracks influenced them. And then you have those guys influencing game soundtracks now, you know, and that goes all the way back to Yellow Magic Orchestra, you know, like their first track on their first album has like arcade sounds in it. and they were like the biggest influence on video game music from the 80s and early 90s. And then you have like both Ryuichi Sakamoto and Haruomi Hosono working on game soundtracks for the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. You know, like it's a circle. You know, it's always retrofitting. So yeah, there's like the two sides of it. You know, you should know the roots of it, but you should also know that there's a flow to this whole history. You know, it's not like it's not just like one-sided thing. Yeah, if you give it time, you will see the value, because it's electronic music being made in such a different environment. You know, you have like this classically trained Japanese who's probably like one of the best pianists in the country or whatever, like graduated from Tokyo University, and then he's tasked with like making techno, you know. That will generate like weird, interesting stuff, you know. And it's super cool to get to know that. That's what I would say.
If people want to find you online on YouTube or Twitter or SoundCloud, what should they search for? Dedeco.
Search for Dedeco on SoundCloud. It's just Dedeco. It's easy to find. And on YouTube, if you search for DedecoVGM or DedecoDJ, you can find it. There's like this huge Brazilian YouTuber who plays like FIFA. He's got like millions of subscribers, and he's also called Dedeco. So you have to search for DedecoDJ or DedecoVGM to find it. Twitter and Instagram, same stuff.
Awesome. Right. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to hear this PS2 mix.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been an honor, and it's been pretty fun as well.
Okay, we're going to move on to Done in 60 seconds, where we take an arbitrary 60 seconds to quickly recommend things to each other and convince the other person to take a listen. Let's be fair, we're always going to take a bit of a listen because it's always fantastic stuff. I'm going to go first. I'm going to get my timer ready. So, Matthew Ombler. I haven't played a game called After Us that came out, as I understand it, quite recently. I don't know if it got a huge amount of press, despite being very pretty and lots of good vibes. It's an exploration game set in a surrealistic post-human world. The composer for the game, Daniel Elms, is a British composer of contemporary classical and electroacoustic music. And I was trying to find this on Apple Music because I saw a good tweet about it, and it wasn't on the platform. And I politely asked Daniel, I was like, "Oh, when's it coming on Apple Music?" And he's like, "You know what? Just have it." So he just sent it to me, and it is amazing. It's like ambient electronica in the style of Blade Runner 2049, very deep and that kind of Hans Zimmer wide sound, and you should check it out. It is a mood.
Perfectly sold. That sounds amazing. Let's take a listen. That is absolutely gorgeous. that reminds me of that current era of kind of like contemporary electronic pianists. Do you know people like Oliver Arnolds and Niels Frams and people like that? It's that really almost haunting electronic sound like that. I'm gonna honestly listen to all of this.
And your man Max Richter as well. He's probably the most famous, I'd say.
Yeah, this sounds like the stuff I would sit back at university in my room and have lots of smokes to.
Are those days gone now? That's sad.
They're few and far between now. Definitely no smoking indoors.
Cool. What have you got for me? Get that timer ready?
The timer is ready, and I have come prepared with an obligatory banger. This is the way, you can only expect that from me now. This is from a special album for Metal Gear Solid 2. I'm not quite sure why this song was written, why it was remixed. I mean, once you take a listen, it will become apparent because this is a Metal Gear song after all. But I think the only apt way to introduce it is by saying Metal Gear in the house.
That is an incredible banger. And the drop, like minute and a half in, is just sensational. It reminds me a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some musician overlap with, do you remember Zone of Enders?
Yes. Well, it's Konami, isn't it? So
when I once went into a CEX, which is a kind of exchange video game store in the UK, and I heard just this incredibly futuristic song with sort of liquid female vocals. Uber cool thing, and I and all I could hear was like one piece of the lyrics. This is before Shazam. I could hear one piece of the lyric, got home, found out what it was, and it was Kiss Me Sunlights from, I believe, Zone of Enders 2. I could be wrong, but it's just this kind of whole future mechy Konami vibe. There's a whole kind of subgenre of video game music, and this track fits dead bang right in the middle of it, of that vibe. That's incredible stuff.
I feel like they've got a team of musicians, the Beatmania crew, who back in the 90s, noughties, whenever they had like a proper game soundtrack out and it was time for a remix, they'd call in the Beatmania boys, which I like. I'm gonna get the Beatmania boys on this because they did. There's a Castlevania album that has, you get those video game albums from the 90s and noughties that normally have like a small handful of remixed tracks or arranged tracks, and every other track on there is from the OST. There's a Castlevania album that has a liquid drum and bass song, and it's the exact same vibe. It just sounds just like that in terms of production and stuff. So maybe there's just like a liquid like D&B head just somewhere in Konami who's just pumping out all of these wild remixes.
Maybe I'm a bigger fan of liquid D&B than I previously knew.
There you are.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for on the GXM podcast. Thank you for joining us as we explore the intersection between our two favourite things, which are video games and music. Please be sure to subscribe, and if your podcatcher of choice allows it, leave us a review or just a star rating. I think Spotify, for instance, you need to have listened to one episode to then be able to leave a star rating for the whole show. That would be very helpful to us to get a high rating, obviously. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at GXM Podcast. I'm at TQuillfelt on Twitter. That's TQILLFELDT. Matt is at Matt Ombler on Twitter. That's Matt with only one T and then OMBLER. If you have any feedback, comments, complaints, corrections, anything at all, hit us up at gxmpodcast@gmail.com. The show was produced by both of us. It was edited by me, and music is by Zach Foster. And once again, thank you very much to Dedeco for the interview. Thank you so much. Oh, Matt, you've covered up my notes.